Hey everybody, what's happening? It's Ed O'Keefe, and I'm really excited about my guest today, Kent Clothier. I asked him to be on it because I really feel his story, which we dive into, is just a great story for anyone achieving any kind of success. And then who also sees the other side of that success and having it like kind of crumble all around you, both like personally, financially, family-wise, and then to hear Kent's rebound's probably too soft of a word, but just kind of the whole rebuild in his comeback. He's doing amazing stuff. I love this guy, great person, great family. He has a great story at the end of it on how his son's actually involved with the company now. And I think it's a topic that hit me home because I've been on all sides of this topic, good, bad, ugly, in business. And there's this, there's I think a false self-identification with success that happens at times where it's easy to believe that you are the reason why everything is working, and then when things don't, how to put that in proper order. And so in this podcast, we go into that, and I probably have more thoughts on that in the future. But that's it. Enjoy the podcast. Let me know what you think of it. All right. Thanks, everybody. All right. Hey, everybody. It's Ed O'Keefe, and welcome to the Ed O'Keefe Show. Today, I have a really good friend of mine, and I'm super stoked because my friend Kent Clothier, who I'm going to tell you a lot more about in a second, and he's going to tell about himself as well, is not only a super successful entrepreneur, he's a great dad, a role model in so many ways. And I asked him to jump on the call because Ken had actually posted a Facebook post. I'm going to read the beginning of it, and then it's going to open up the interview because I'll let Kent kind of fill in the gaps, and we're just going to dive right in. Kent posted like a handful of days ago. One of the most challenging times in my life was right after being run out of a company that I dedicated my life to back in 2000. I poured my heart and soul into something at the expense of everything that truly mattered in my life unknowingly. I'd wake up early and be the first in the office, then leave late over and over again, wearing this as a badge of honor. I'd spend weeks every month on the road, away from new wife in our new home in a new city where she knew no one, effectively abandoning her while I poured myself into the business. Ken, I'm going to go to you in like 1 second. Let me just do these last few sentences because this is what I thought was just so impressive that you shared this. I wasn't present for my young son. I'd missed the games, the practices, and the moments you can never get back. I did all of this whispering into my own ear, the sales seduction of this is for my family. I'm doing it for them. Now I'm going to pause there because I thought that was the part where I'll let you tell the rest of the story on this and like kind of the sequence that goes here. But that's the part that hit me because even to this day, I think that's what, you know, as the provider of the house, and this could be men and women, but this is probably topics going to strike stronger to men in a lot of ways because I'd like to go some places. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. But that was the part where the sales thing you say to yourself of like, well, I'm doing this for you. Don't you understand what I'm doing? Do you mind sharing with everybody kind of like what happened next? I think you started saying you were rewarded with
quickly,
success.
Look, we are all a product of our own success. And I was that guy. I was a guy that, as I said, had at a very young age, had experienced a lot of success, a lot of wealth, probably equally a lot of accolades, a lot of praise for what I was doing. And that's what I was being rewarded, if you will, for my good behavior. And my good behavior was pouring myself into this business, doing what, came very naturally to me, which was just go all in, do everything I can to be successful, to, again, whether that whether I was realizing that through accolades or whether I was realizing that through praise or whether I was realizing that monetarily, right? It all felt great. And I was moving up and I was well recognized in my industry. I was effectively, I mean, more than one time was called the golden boy. Like, this guy cannot fail. He's got it all figured out. And so everything around me was reinforcing this behavior that I was doing, which was, like I said, a badge of honor, man. I would get there at 5:30 in the morning and I would not leave till 8 or 9 o'clock at night. I thought that was, let's just be very candid. There's a lot of times when businesses, especially when they're starting up, that's a requirement, period.
Yeah.
But it's a very, very slippery slope when it comes at the expense of things that we lose sight of really, really quickly. And that, in the way, the one thing that I've come to appreciate now as I've gotten older is that I am one of the best salespeople you'll ever meet, especially to myself. I can talk myself into anything. I can sell myself on anything. Why this is great. I will always look for the silver lining. I will always look for the ways this is going to manifest itself and be so much better for ultimately what I'm trying to accomplish in my life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't have that balance. I had no balance there. It was all like, hey, I'm creating this wealth. I'm creating these opportunities. I'm putting myself in these positions where ultimately we're going to be able to live the life that we want to live, and all the BS, the bullshit that we tell ourselves to make it all feel better and easier to go down. And I was really, really fortunate because, it wasn't too far after all of this was going down, and it had been going down for years, that I got humbled, and I got humbled in a really, really big way. And I had a run-in with my partners, literally thought about quitting for maybe 10 seconds before I actually did it. Was just so full of crap, was just so full of piss and vinegar and cockiness, did not believe I could fail because I never had, that I walked in one morning, got into a run-in with my partners, and I was like, you know what, guys, I'm out of here. See ya. Pissed. Never even made it to my desk. Literally had my backpack on my briefcase at the time, over my shoulder, had not even made it all the way back to my desk before I had stopped by the guys that owned the company at that point. And we had a tiff and never even made it to my desk. Turned around, walked out of there, and like, I'm out of here. Started immediately putting the pieces in place to go start a competing company as fast as I could. Right back in the same industry, same customers, literally tried to go pirate their employees, I was just pissed off. And all I cared about, my main motivation there was, I just want them to have this moment where they realize they let the greatest thing that could have ever happened to them, let it slip right through their fingers, right? I've sat here and I've tripled the size of this company, and they're going to regret the day they let me walk out the door. And, that's a horrible way to start a new business, by the way. Just if anybody's you don't ever want to start that way. And that started me down a path to where ultimately, and I'm more than willing to get into it, but ultimately in a course of 2 years, I lost everything. I literally lost the marriage, lost the business, friendships, peers, all of it went to hell. And it was wildly humbling to realize how fast I could fall and how many people were rooting for me to fall, quite frankly. And that was a really, really, really dark time in my life, but it was necessary, and it helped me to understand that anybody, and I don't care who ever sees this, right? The reality of it is there's not a single person, a business person that ever watches this that does not, in all likelihood, has very little appreciation for how vulnerable you really are, and that it can all be gone like this. And if that's the case, think about what just happened to COVID. All these businesses that have been operating for decades without any needing to look over their shoulder at all, and in a moment's time, everything about their business changed, right? Their business was being forced to shut down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's a huge lesson to understand you are vulnerable. And if you are, then doesn't it make sense to build something that is actually giving you the freedom and the time to pay attention to the things that truly matter, which is your family, which is your legacy, which are all those moments you cannot get back, because build it where that is a huge part of what you're doing, because, you know, then if you lose, you're still winning, but you don't want to lose and lose.
Yeah. And you began to say something that was powerful there is, you had so many people rooting for you to fail, where I think as I've gotten older, like, actually it's so funny. I won't partner or work with someone more in depth if they've never failed in business. You see it. And the only reason I can recognize it, like full transparency, is because I was that guy, 28, 29, everything was just kind of clicking along. And I don't know if this was similar or not, but like, when I think it's too much about me dictating my own successes, well, then what happens when something doesn't work? Am I a complete failure as a human being, and is my identity
Right.
like, and I think that's something that, but a
Well,
lot of, yeah, go ahead. Let's talk about that a little bit. I think that's one topic I did want.
I don't know, and yourself included, I literally don't know of a single entrepreneur that I admire that is doing, has done amazing things in their life, both personally and professionally, that at some level has not struggled with their personal identity and who they and what they believe about themselves is some way wrapped up in their business success and or their failures and or what's going on in their public persona and in their public brand, right? I mean, we just live in a world where literally everything you ever see about anybody on social media is amazing, right? But nobody really talks about the stuff that they've struggled with, et cetera. But undoubtedly that does happen, and it is happening to somebody right now that is listening or watching this.
I mean, I would say it's always happening at some level, right? So it's interesting though, it's on the whole, people rooting for you to fail. There is something about like being an entrepreneur where you like, especially if you're kind of a grassroots entrepreneur, somebody like I came from a blue collar family. It was very counterintuitive for me to go down this path. I had a lot of people that weren't rooting for me to fail, but they just didn't understand why I didn't just go get a job. Like they didn't understand it. And so, there's,
rooting, let me just add some clarity to something. Rooting for you to fail might be a little harsh. People that are even on your side, and this is in my humble opinion, what I've personally experienced, but people that are even on your side are more than prepared that when you stumble or when you falter, fall down a little bit, they are more than prepared to be like, well, see, I kind of told you that might happen.
Yeah,
right? I told you to be careful. I told you to watch out for yourself. I told you to do this. You should have listened to me, which in my mind is a version of exactly that kind of, look, either you're with me or you're against me, but you don't get to play both sides, right? Either you're all in with me and you're going to buy into what I'm trying to get done. And even when I fall down, you're going to be there to pick me up and say, go get them again, or you're not. And quite frankly, there's a lot of people who have a lot of really good intention. And, they mean no malice, they have no ill will towards us whatsoever, but indirectly, they are absolutely holding us back or all too prepared to say, see, I told you, you got to be, and that's what I mean by that.
Yeah. And I was going to say that one thing that is, that chip on the shoulder and trying to prove people wrong or trying to prove that you're right in some ways served, I'll just speak for myself. It served me very well early on in my career. It just did. It was a new, doing all this stuff, going into dentistry. I didn't know anything about dentistry. I jumped in, got a license to sell how to grow your dental practice. And, there was a lot of reasons why that should have failed. And I made it work through stubbornness and naiveness, maybe in some ways, right?
Yep.
But there is a point where now I'm 46. We just fast forward 20 years where making sure that the people around, I have kind of the whole, what's that movie, the Christmas movie, the George, where he bankrupts the bank and everyone, the whole neighborhood came to support him.
Oh yeah, yeah,
making
yeah.
sure that whole like dig your well before you're thirsty thing is real, which means you're depositing in relationships as you're moving forward, even if you are going after your, as you should, go for your own goals. So I want to talk a little bit about the family stuff, and then I want to segue into, like, your posts were long, of just kind of how you reinvented yourself and what you had to
Yeah.
mentally and emotionally go through. Like, so I don't even know your whole backstory on the. I'm assuming you got divorced because you said you lost your
Yep.
wife. Okay,
Yep.
and then that had
Yeah.
to
I
be.
mean, look, I'll tell you exactly what happened. I'll give
Yeah,
you
talk to me.
the blow by blow here, right? So effectively, I walked out of that business on March 14th of 2000. As I said, I started pretty quickly. I'd worked out a favorable non-compete. So the guys that I'd worked with just asked me to sit on the sidelines and or in the shadows, if you will, and pay me a lot of money to kind of sit tight while they tried to figure out. They were scrambling because their key guy, the guy running the company, had just walked out the door. And so I sat around and kind of formulated my plan, formulated what I was going to go do. Sold my house. I had this, oceanfront home down there in Boca Raton, Florida. I sold that house, moved back to Memphis, Tennessee, where my son was, and wanted to get close to family, and a little bit of that. I just needed to be nurtured a little bit, right? I was felt a little beat up and a little shock. And I got back there and quickly realized that I had outgrown my former hometown, right? Basically, I had, so the story is that my father and I started this arbitrage company when I was 17 years old, right? And we were buying and selling truckloads of groceries. We would just flip these trucks. So we would go buy a truckload of, for instance, Peter Pan peanut butter, where the manufacturer was selling it at a discount in Miami, Florida, and they just needed to move 40 trucks. And so we were the guys that would pick up the phone and call Winn-Dixie and all these different companies and say, hey, all this excess inventory you're getting from the manufacturer, we'll buy it and we'll just take it out the back door. You don't even have to put it on the shelves, right? And the reason they would do that is that the average grocery store makes about a 2% net profit. And here we were offering them 20%, right? And paying it all cash, pick it up, take it. Well, this little business that we started, by the time I was 23, I never went to college. And so by the time I was 23, I was running a $50 million a year company. By the time I was 28, we had been purchased by a much larger competitor down in Boca Raton, Florida. And so suddenly I was running an $800 million a year company.
Wow.
And then in 3 years, I turned that $800 million a year company into 1.8 billion, right? And so seventh largest privately held company in the state of Florida, 600 employees, all, directly or indirectly kind of reporting up through me. And so when I tell you I had experienced nothing but wild success, I mean, that's what my 20s look like. And so now fast forward to about a month after my 30th birthday, March 14th, I walk out of there. And so now I'm like, okay, well, I can't lose. I'm Kent Clothier. I know how to go do this. And so I'm going to go start this business and I'm just going to go rebuild it all, but I'm going to own it all. And so I started down that path, and I was nowhere near as clever, nowhere near as smart as I thought I was. I had very little, up until that point, appreciation for all of the moving parts that went into this organization that I had line of sight of, but I did not have a lot of direct responsibility of in my prior business. And so now all of a sudden, all of that was on me, and my deficiencies as a CEO, became a reality really fast. And so in my haste to scale this business in Memphis, I made an acquisition, and I made an acquisition really fast, didn't do very good due diligence. And this business is entirely based off of you buy a truckload of groceries, you create a receivable or you create inventory, and then you leverage that receivable inventory and borrow against it with the bank, right? You effectively get a line of credit. It's called factoring. So if I have $100,000 in inventory sitting on my floor, or $100,000 in receivables sitting out there, the bank will give me 75% of it as collateral, and so I can keep growing. And lo and behold, when I bought this company, there was $1 million in receivables on the books that was shit. It was bad, and we didn't. And so suddenly, I had borrowed $750,000 from the bank. That was not good. I had signed on the dotted line. The receivables were fake receivables. They didn't exist. I had very little recourse to go after the people that I had done this with. And so suddenly, and in this environment, I mean, not everybody's going to remember this, but some people will remember it. This is right after 9/11. This is right when WorldCom, which is one of the biggest telecom companies in the world, was melting to the ground because they had bad debt on the books. This is right when Enron was melting to the ground, and all these guys are going to jail. Sarbanes-Oxley had just came out, and literally I have an auditor come to me and he's like, "We think you might have just committed bank fraud." And
oh my gosh.
And I'm 32 years old, and everything that is on the news is people going to jail for those and I'm just like in a complete panic, right? And so I literally in December of that year had it's never happened before, never happened since, but in a restaurant celebrating somebody's birthday, I walked into the men's restroom and passed out, collapsed on the floor in a cold sweat, having an anxiety attack. And my brother happened to find me, quickly got me up, got me the hell out of there. And basically my entire world was crumbling down around me, right? I was not as good as I thought I was. And so I had to make some really, really hard choices right then and there, that I had to get control of my life because I was in a bad spot. And so I made the decision, and then I followed through with it, that I would wipe myself out personally, millions of dollars, and basically pay off as much of the company debt as possible, close the company down. So wiped out all the savings, all the 401ks, everything, just gave it all away to get rid of. And by the way, this is after I'd just gone through a divorce and given half of it away.
Yeah. So that's the sequence there. Yeah.
And so then here's the other half of all of it, right? And so now I'm sitting there, no business, no marriage, living in a city that I don't want to be in anymore, right? A business that has failed very, very publicly because of who I was in this industry, and had burnt every relationship on the way down. Like there was no repairing anything with my former partners and employers. There was literally nothing. There was no place to turn. And at that moment, it was wild. I had a young woman reach out to me who, when I was going through my divorce at the former company, or when my wife and I were on the rocks and we were separated, she had basically inquired, "Hey, we should try to date." And we said no, because we were at the same company. And here I am at my lowest moment, and this girl picks up the phone and calls me and says, "Hey, you want to go on a date?" Literally, I have nothing. I have nothing left to offer. And so I meet her in Atlanta, Georgia. She flies up from Florida. We go on a date. And then I quickly knew, all right, I got to sell everything. I need to move back to Florida. I need to basically start over. I got to figure this out, right? Which is a really hard decision, because my son, who is 7 years old, is in Memphis. But I knew if I stayed in Memphis, I had a lot of family, I had a lot of network there, that I would fall into this "it's okay to be average" kind of mentality.
Yeah. And this is actually, can I stop you real quick? So I talked about this. I shot another show it's a mini episode with just myself talking about how when one of my companies failed, I really had to fight through this whole like I'm the loser, right? Like it was all about me. And that one of the things that I did that helped tremendously was the same thing I do when I go to the gym, which is like, if you don't want to go to the gym, rule number one is get to the gym. And it's about changing the environment. And so I just started going back out into environments where guys' businesses were doing really well, because then I could, now my brain was like, oh, this is how I could help here. This is how I can help here. And the world didn't end. Just that thing ended. But since it was my world, I attached that thing with who I was. And it's like, bam, it's like the curtains opened back up. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, breathe again. Now I just got to figure out, forward. So you brought up environment. And so,
yeah. I mean, dude, look, we know this. I mean, you and I met in a mastermind, that we know when you're around that energy, when you're around other people that are not necessarily going through the struggles that you're going through. And in fact, their businesses are crushing it. That just the simple fact of being in those rooms or having those conversations or changing your perspective, changing your environment, it makes all the difference in the world. You can't have mediocre, pathetic, victim conversations in a room like that. Everything is about growth and aspirational. Let's do more. Let's figure out how to go and do. I mean, the conversations are so elevated that, we've all heard that a rising tide raises all ships. I personally have never seen that more evident than when I go into those rooms. Like, you literally cannot be pathetic if you're in those rooms. Like, you might be trapped feeling pathetic, but if you go change your environment and you go get around people that are not seeing the world that way, it is shocking what that does to your outlook on what the opportunities that are really out there, right? I mean, you either get to focus on the obstacle or you can focus on the opportunity. If you want to focus on opportunities, get around people that are focused on opportunities and they don't see the world as, oh my God, my business is melting to the ground. I mean, again, the greatest examples I've seen of this is, and some of the most inspiring things I've seen is the people through COVID. I mean, you see some of these businesses, for instance, like gym owners. I mean, there's, a good friend of mine, Bedros Keuilian, who owns Fit Body Boot Camp. He has 800 franchisees. And all the gyms get shut down. I mean, he could have thrown a pity party instantly and been like, we're done. But in 48 hours, they immediately had a virtual setup in studio for all of their members across the country. And as equally as he did that, there are all these gyms that just said, all right, we're out, give up. I mean, you can focus on the obstacle or you can focus on the opportunity. And I think it's really important to be around people that focus like that. And so that's the reason I went to Florida, is because I'd already experienced that, right? And I knew what I wanted to be around. I knew the energy I was wanting to be around. I knew it was, a highly aspirational hustle kind of place. And I knew if I stayed where I was, that I'd be surrounded by people that just would tell me, it's okay, just, do what you got to do, just get by. And I just couldn't have that in my life. And so I went down there and in fact moved in with my girlfriend and saw one of those late night infomercials talking about real estate investing, and went down and made a decision to get involved, which scared the hell out of me because I had never done anything in real estate. And I sure as hell wasn't trusting myself to make any good financial decisions. Here I was about to spend $1,000 and I literally had less than $5,000 in the bank, which was super scary for me. But, I look back on it very, very fondly because I was just desperate enough, which I think desperation or effectively being so fed up that you got to make a move. I was in that headspace. And so you and I both know that the world is littered with people that buy courses or whatever and then don't do anything. And I was just in the headspace where that purchase, I had to do something with it.
Yeah.
And I flipped my first house in less than 30 days, made $8,000. I'll never forget it. Sitting in a parking lot in Coral Springs, Florida, crying like a baby in my car after I picked up a check for $8,200.
Wow.
I literally had made millions of dollars. And this $8,200 to me was one of the most profound moments in my life because I had done it in a completely different industry, effectively with no network, no help, no name, no nothing. I just figured out how to go make something else happen. And I can remember thinking very clearly with no plan, by the way, but I knew right then I would never be broke because I had acquired a skill that I knew I could, if I had to, I could do what I needed to do. And
in that moment, Ken, I'm kind of interrupting you. It's like in that moment, it's like, wow, you just experienced more freedom than you ever did when you had the higher income business. Like it was like, wow, I now see the gateway. And it's so interesting. So we're going to talk about Kent's mastermind here in a moment and how he rebuilt everything up. But like we have a group, a coaching group with Consulting for Equity. We do masterminds as well. And I'm always amazed at people that say like, well, I'm just going to try this myself for a while and see what. I was like, well, how's that current plan working right now for you?
Right.
Like you can go try it yourself. I get it. But how's your plan compared to the proven model that's over here? Like, I mean, walk me through how that's going to work out.
Right.
Because people will send their kids to college for, $40 grand a year for 4, 5, 6 years. but someone's afraid to invest 5 grand, 10 grand, 25 grand in a skill set that's
Right.
going to create freedom for the next 30, 40 years.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, you know what it is, brother. In my opinion on that, and something I have become, extremely passionate about, like the sign says behind me, the time is now, right?
yeah,
Is those people, unfortunately, the way they view time is terribly irresponsible, right? The older I've gotten, the more I realize, and I know this is just a natural progression, but the more I've come to realize how precious every one of these days, every one of these moments really, really are, right? And if somebody values time the way they should, in my opinion, then what they should also be doing is figuring out a way to get as much of it as they possibly can. And if somebody can give me a shortcut that helps me to get the result in a much faster time period, right? If I got to go invest $25,000 for somebody to show me how to get the outcome I'm looking for as fast as, then why would I spend years figuring that out, right? That return on investment is so much larger, because ultimately what that means is I'm going to get the years, months, weeks, days to spend the way I want to spend versus banging around those 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. days trying to figure it out. And it's really that simple. And so having somebody who really understands how that clock is ticking on all of us all too quick, like I said, you and I have experienced it, right? I mean, when you get in the room with people who have the answers and have the blueprint and have the understanding and the resources to make things happen quickly, I mean, that in return on that investment is just infinite. Versus, I'll just figure it out. Well,
okay. But it doesn't come without action. So I want to hear your action sets. I read your second post because you had so much confidence on the post, and the 2 words that kept coming up were like super hard decision plus action. Like that's how you rebuilt everything,
right?
So
right. And so look,
a little bit.
Yeah, I would love to tell everybody here, that I'm super smart. And at the time I realized exactly what I was doing. The reality of it is that, you can only, as Steve Jobs said in his Stanford address, you can only connect the dots looking back, right? And so looking back, it's easy for me to understand exactly what I was doing. And what I was doing was making really hard decisions, not backing away from them, and then ultimately taking massive action to make those decisions a reality. So moving back to Florida, away from my son, really hard decision, massive action, but it leads me to the other hard decisions and actions to make that where my son can come see me every 2 weeks and all these things, but it's what I had to do, right? Making a decision to go down and just check out that seminar, right? And humble myself and, be one of the cronies in the room, and then making another decision to actually buy it, then making another decision to actually make myself vulnerable and take the actions that are inside of that course that I was clearly not confident in. Go talking to buyers and sellers. And I'd never done anything like that before. And, but pouring myself into the action that I needed to take as a result of the decisions that I had made. Same thing started to really manifest itself as I quickly realized I didn't own a business, I owned a job. And what I mean by that is that it's cool to get a skill set and know that you'd never be broke, but that's not a business. The world is filled with high income earners that if they don't show up day in and day out, the money stops. And I knew in my new life that I was creating with my wife and now a new daughter on the way that I wanted to experience freedom. I wanted to be present. I wanted to be around for the things that I had missed with my son. I didn't want to be that guy again. And so I became really, really fixated on building a highly scalable business. Right? In other words, dumbing it down to its simplest parts, not backing away from the hard decisions when it comes to hiring people and when it comes to putting processes in place and understanding exactly fundamentally that, hey, I'm going to take a little bit less. No, I was making 100% of something before. Now I'm making 20%, but I'm doing 10 times as much business. Being able to put yourself in that kind of mentality over and over and over again. And, it worked for me. The business scaled. It wasn't easy. but the business scaled and it started taking off. And one of the decisions I had to make along the way is that in my particular industry, it was very, very prevalent at the time, and still is today. Now I think about it, that effectively everything that is taught in real estate is just go get a really good deal under contract. And then if you've got it cheap enough, then there's always going to be a buyer for it. Well, that's not a scalable business as far as I was concerned. And so one of the things I'd had a great deal of success with in the way I'd scaled the grocery business was a thing called reverse wholesaling, where I basically turned the model around. I said, why don't I just go ask every single person who's buying from me right now? I could sell you anything on any day, any quantity, deliver it right to your door. What do you actually want to buy? And let me go to work, right?
Yeah.
And nobody had ever done that in the real estate space, right? Apparently. And so
Wow.
I basically went out and I figured out a way that I could find all of the cash buyers in any market. And they didn't need banks. They didn't need money. They had a huge appetite. I figured out a way to find them, and I figured out a way to engage them. And then I, more importantly, figured out a way to nurture them and understand exactly what they wanted to buy, effectively streamlining my process, which then led me to a repeatable business, right? Because I know I've got these customers. I know exactly what they want to buy. They want to buy a 3-2, 2,100 square feet. They want to pay $225,000 in this part of the county, these very specific zip codes. I knew it all. And I would just go create those opportunities over and over and over again. I was effectively creating a line of activity that always led to the same result over and over and over and over again. And that allowed me to put people in place. Well, what it also did was now the recession hit, the Great Recession. And if everybody remembers, that was a credit-driven, real estate-driven collapse. And here I was with a business that's in real estate, but didn't need credit.
Credit, yeah.
And so my business exploded, went through the roof.
Wow.
And suddenly there's a vacuum. All my competitors got taken out because they were selling to different people, while all my buyers were like, oh man, blood's in the streets. Let's buy as much as we can. And Kent's our guy. And so I started flipping, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of houses to these guys. And it became a behemoth. And it also got me a lot of attention on a national perspective, where people are like, we don't know what this guy's doing in Florida, but we need to pay attention. And can he teach us? And so suddenly, not only do I have an investment company that's doing very, very well, all of a sudden I have a software company that's showing people how I'm finding all of these buyers. And suddenly I have an education company that's teaching thousands of people how to do this. And all this opportunity is kind of spawning out of it. Now again, one of the things I stressed in that post was I didn't always have any understanding, or I should say rarely had any understanding of exactly what the outcome was going to be. But I always stepped into and leaned into really hard decisions and taking massive action to make sure that I went after and supported that decision as much as I can. With that being said, the collateral damage, how many times I've failed in that process is for sure, it's everywhere. But I won more than I failed. And, now we're sitting here, we've got 60,000 members that we've taught how to flip houses and build wealth and et cetera. We've got a very successful mastermind, very successful software company, an investment company that flips about 150 houses a month. We have funds that we run now. We have, lots and lots and lots of opportunity that ultimately just continues to spin out of this as we continue to make hard decisions and push ourselves to do it. But it all literally started with just one hard decision, and then not backing away from it and taking massive action. And quite now, I will tell you, you fast forward 20 years later, here's what's really cool about that, is that journey has made me so much better as a husband, as a father, as a leader, as a man, to trust my instincts, to trust who I am, to understand that, to make myself vulnerable, to push in on things that when maybe I would have 20 years ago had a ton of self-doubt. I mean, you're basically flexing and exercising a muscle that becomes so valuable to you throughout your life that, it is not about where you end up. It's about, man, who you become.
Yeah, totally. Now, do you mind if I press in on a little bit? So what would you say, like, whether it's boundaries or new healthy rules have you created internally for yourself when it's framed towards your family? And like, how old's your daughter right now?
So I have a 16-year-old and an 8-year-old.
Oh, wow.
And so my son is 28, and he works in the business. He works in the business. Yep. And he does great. He's fantastic. He crushes the game. And here's the irony. My son, as I've gotten older, I look back and realize I could have been a better father, but my son doesn't know any different. My son thinks I was an amazing father and thinks it was all great, right? And so I just know I could have done better. And so I've tried to do a lot better with my two daughters. I had one in my 20s, I had one in my 30s, and one in my 40s. And inevitably, I'm a much better father in my 40s than I ever was in my 20s.
That's funny.
But yeah, we carve out, look, I'll give you another hard decision, massive action, right? A few years ago, about 10 years ago, I just knew I wanted a change in my life, and I knew I wanted to be congruent. I knew I wanted to create a lifestyle, and that was really, really important to me. And I didn't think that was happening in my life. So I literally packed up the whole business and moved it to La Jolla, California, San Diego, right? Because where I lived in Florida, it was nice and everything else, but the reality is you couldn't walk anywhere. You couldn't do all these things that I just felt like I wanted to do in my life. And so, I live in a little village right here in San Diego. I live in an oceanfront home. I walk to my office every day. I walk my little girl to school. We have a Starbucks on the corner. We have a restaurant. There's a lot of, basically it's a different lifestyle. It's something that I wanted, and we created it, and we made really hard decisions, and we took massive action, and we didn't have all the answers, and sure as hell didn't know if it was going to work. But ultimately, not only did it work, but we flourished in that environment. And so I carve out the time for my kids. It's on my calendar. I'm very, very present about the moments and the opportunities, and a really good friend of ours, mutual friend of ours, Jesse, I love what he always says. I'm never too tired for my kids. I try to do that. I'm not going to tell you that I'm great at it, but I try to do that, and I really make time for that. I really try to make time for the things that matter to me. I tell people all the time, look, I'm in the business of collecting moments. I'm not in the business of collecting shit. I'm not into the cars, and I'm not into all the watches and all that. I just want to create as many cool experiences for my kids and my family as I possibly can. And I really try to honor that each and every day. I try to be really disciplined with my time. Everybody has their moments, but I try to, make sure that on my calendar very specifically is carved out the times that are set for my family. My 16-year-old, I'll give you an example. My 16-year-old this year, I think it's really important. So on several business trips, I literally took her on the road with me. I want her to see, exactly what it looks like, right? And so all things that I've learned along the way that ultimately those are the things that really, really matter. And if you make time for them, then they have a tendency, in my opinion, to those are the seeds you want to plant, right? Those are the seeds you want to plant. Because when you go to pick a nut crop and you see the way your kids talk about you and speak about you and talk to their friends about their experience, and there's nothing more rewarding than that.
Yeah. And Ken, it's so funny you say that, because we have a couple of events coming up soon, and then you have your event. Is it the 4th and 5th of February? Yeah.
4th, 5th, and 6th. Yep.
Yeah. And it's just tell everybody the website in case, even if they miss this one, they have a website.
Yeah, no, it's called attendscaleandescape.com is where you go. And it is an event that is near and dear to my heart that I had to put on hold for COVID, but I'm extremely passionate about scale your business so you can actually escape the grind, right? And that's what it's called, the Scale and Escape Summit. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of people that will teach you, like, again, no different than what I was taught, how to get a skill set and go out there and flourish and, again, never be broke. But there's very few people that will teach you how to actually turn that into a real business, right? With people, processes, systems, leverage, automation, all the components of that. And just because you're a good hustler doesn't mean you will be a good business owner, right? It is a completely different skill set. You have to learn how to become that leader. You have to learn how to create that balance. You have to learn and it doesn't come natural. And so we do this event once a year. We have several hundred people that'll be in the room, and then we'll have probably close to 1,000 that'll be online to really kind of walk through our process on how we've been able to take. I mean, look, we're looking at right at a dozen businesses now that we've been able to take to 7, 8, 9, and clearly 1 to 10 figures. And so I think we've got it dialed in to a certain level. It's certainly a certain level where I'm comfortable talking about it in front of a lot of people. So it's exciting.
Yeah, I love it. And you have Jesse Itzler's going to be out there too, correct?
Jesse Itzler will be there. Like I said, mutual good friend of ours. And then Ed Milet will be there. Who's another amazing guy, and what he's been able to do in his life and the people he's been able to impact. We've got basically everybody that's coming has built wildly successful businesses, but equally as important, if not more important, they built wildly successful lives. These are people I really, really admire. That, you look up and guys that are, Bobby Castro, right? Him and his wife Sophia sold a business for $1 billion a couple of years ago, and they are so connected with their family, and everything is so purpose driven. I mean, those are the kinds of people I want to surround myself with.
Yeah. And what's kind of interesting, just for everybody who's watching or listening to this, is that, what most people don't realize is that when you run events, like you're running that event, you actually get to design it for yourself. Like you're designing it to like, hey, just so everyone understands, like Ken is still up leveling himself and creating that osmosis. Yeah. That osmosis effect that we talked about. Otherwise you're just doing a transactional thing. It's not exciting. It's not all that stuff. So
it's fun to be around the people that you want to be around, right? And it's a perfect opportunity to create an outcome, right? To own the outcome instead of being, some participants sitting on the sidelines. Figure out a way to get all the right people in the room that you want to be around.
Yeah. Well, Ken, I want to be respectful of your time. You're awesome, man. How would you, if people are out there, they want to learn more from you, obviously they can go attend scale and escape.com, correct?
Yep.
And then where else? I know you're on Facebook, but what else?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. I mean, Kent Clothier. You can certainly hit me up on Instagram, Kent Clothier. Mm-hmm. You can even go to my website, kentclothier.com. Love connecting with people. If I have anything I can do to help anybody, I will 100% throw everything we've got at it. So, feel free to reach out 100%.
Yeah, I may sneak out and be a 10-year event as well. That's just too many good people. But well, thanks everybody for listening in. I'm gonna have some extra comments. I'm gonna put a post recording here. But Ken, hang with me for 1 second, and thanks so much for being a part of the show. It's been awesome.
My pleasure, brother. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's Ed again. Hey, one last thing before you leave. First, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to the show. If you love this show or this episode and know someone who can benefit, please copy it and share it with them. Also, if you can do me a favor and leave a quick review wherever you listen to these podcasts the most, whether it's Apple, Spotify, etc., it really will help us get the message out to more people. That's it. Thanks again, and make it a great day.